Handled well, foliage adds atmosphere and holds the viewer's attention. Handled poorly, it can feel noisy, repetitive, and lacking a sense of unity. In this 6th lesson of the Wooden Door with Floral Accents series, we move on to the foliage. Here you'll learn to think about foliage as a system of shapes, color relationships, and rhythm, not a collection of separate leaves. We'll start from the overall mass of the plant, establish rhythm with large strokes, develop depth using color variation, and introduce selective details to guide the viewer's eye. Subscribe to develop your artistic thinking and follow this series step by step. The previous lessons are already on the channel. Let's begin by setting up the foliage layer. This will give you more flexibility while working. Pick up brush number 1 and choose a calm, neutral green, even though the greens in the reference look a bit more intense. As we discussed back in the first lesson, this brush works best for smooth, organic shapes, exactly what we need for foliage. Let's start with the plant on the left, using a brush size of about 20%. But after testing this color, you'll notice it suits the plants on the right side of the wall better. The order doesn't matter, so let's start there. A good way to start is by shaping the center of the plant. Use large, confident strokes, letting the leaves look sketchy and loose. Leave some small gaps that will be perfect later for adding flower strokes. The farther from the center of the plant, the lighter and more delicate the stroke should become. Later, it's better to switch to brush number 2 to add the tiniest delicate touches. Move on to the next plant. Build small clusters of strokes, leaving gaps for the colorful flowers. It's fine to move slightly away from the reference and make one of the plants appear a bit more full. You have complete freedom in how you interpret the reference. Follow what feels right. The main thing is to vary the angle of the foliage strokes so they differ in shape as much as possible. In some areas, place single strokes, and in others, group them together to form a solid patch. Working on the foliage is always engaging, as the greenery brings life and richness to the composition. The third pot wasn't drawn earlier because it's almost completely covered by leaves. Start from a broad patch in the center and use wide strokes that gradually get smaller toward the edges. Add a couple of strokes to the plant below, but don't define anything specific yet. Pick a deeper, more saturated green to suggest the shadowed areas in the foliage. Create the shadowed areas of the foliage the same way, combining clusters of strokes with small touches. Simply look at where the dark spots appear in the reference and repeat them in your drawing. Feel free to improvise a bit in some places. The key is to keep the strokes varied and fragmented. That's what makes the image interesting to look at. The plan was to make the foliage more detailed, but the abstract version turned out surprisingly harmonious. Sometimes the best moments appear unexpectedly. It's important to notice them and leave everything as it is. Switch to brush number 2 and go back to the initial green shade. This brush is perfect for drawing delicate, thin leaves. The amount of small leaves can change from place to place. Sometimes just a couple of strokes are enough, and sometimes it feels right to lightly suggest the stems as well. It's important to keep changing the shape and direction of the strokes. The contrast between big leaves and their fine, delicate endings always looks expressive. Work on the rest of the plants the same way. To make the foliage more varied, experiment with brush size and switch between big and small strokes. Foliage doesn't always come together perfectly on the first try. Sometimes it takes a little time to find its rhythm and abstract pattern. The goal is to keep a balance where the drawing feels both detailed and unified. This is achieved by spacing the stroke clusters at the right distance from each other. If at some point the foliage starts to feel too fragmented or overloaded, erase the part that feels unnecessary. That is exactly why the foliage was placed on a separate layer. Each artist defined the right balance with techniques like this. There is no need to detail every plant equally. You can choose one to develop more carefully and let the other stay softer and secondary. Now it is time for the red, which will be used to paint the flowers. Add it to the open spaces left between the foliage. Try to choose stroke shapes that echo the form of the flowers themselves, rounded, light, and slightly irregular. To make it feel lighter, let a few strokes go beyond the edge of the plant to create the effect of floating petals. Continue with the other plants using the same approach. Switch to brush number 1, choose a color that feels a bit cooler than the first one, and start shaping the foliage with broad strokes. Switching between larger and smaller brush sizes adds variation and prevents the greenery from looking monotonous and repetitive. Next, define the directions in which the foliage spreads. In places where the reference shows a denser mass of leaves, paint it as a single solid patch. At the top, draw the area where the foliage gradually breaks into separate individual leaves. The shape of the plant does not have to be identical to the reference. If it makes the drawing feel more balanced, slightly change the outline or make it fuller. Keep varying the shape, size, and direction of the strokes to keep the foliage dynamic and expressive. The upper pot is not a key element in the composition, so the foliage inside can be painted in a sketchy way with minimal detail, so it does not attract too much attention. For thin, delicate leaves, use brush number 2 or continue with brush number 1 at a smaller size. Try to avoid identical, repeating strokes and remove any extras right away. A few single leaves can be lightly scattered across the pavement. Take a deep green color, the same one used for the shadows on the plants to the right. With the same movements, define the shadowed areas. Try to keep a balance between the base and dark colors, so the shadows don't feel too heavy. The shadows should deepen the foliage, not weigh it down. Keep them light and breathable. Use brush number 2 to add fine, light leaves around the edges, keeping the same character as the main foliage. Finish the last leaves with a lighter tone. The ones touching the wall can almost blend into the background, turning into soft, nuanced strokes. A softer, more muted green will look great in this area. This way the foliage blends into the wall, helping all parts of the scene connect and feel like one whole piece. Pick a cool shade of red for the flowers. Carefully place the blossoms so they fit naturally into the plant. The color is quite dense and covers the foliage well. Sometimes a few simple strokes are enough to shape the flower silhouette. You can repeat the same trick with floating petals here, by letting a few strokes drift beyond the plant to create a sense of motion. Keep placing them higher as you go. You can also add a few touches to the top pot, even if the flowers there are a different color in the reference. A small amount of dark purple complements the cool red beautifully and gives a nice accent to the red palette. Use it very gently, with soft, almost weightless touches. Pick a very dark, almost black shade and use it to add more detailed shadows for extra contrast. Apply the same tone to refine the shadows around the pot. Keep the top pot simple and just sketch the shadows lightly. On the window, give a soft hint of the grill, keeping it loose and minimal. While still using the dark shade, add a few subtle details to the surrounding elements. Spread a bit of it across the other plants as well. This deep color works best in the area where the foliage touches the pot. Another detail that needs to be darkened is the recess in the door frame. Use a cool lilac shade and brush number 1 for this step. The brush shouldn't leave hard marks. The strokes here should be soft and semi-transparent. Deepening the shadows is an important step in the process. Add a few light strokes to nearby areas so the colors feel more balanced and connected. It is important to connect the foliage with the wall so they feel like part of the same scene. Switch to the wall fill layer and pick a shade with a light green tint. It helps link the greens of the leaves with the warmth of the yellow wall. As you apply it around the plants, it creates a soft shadow that helps them blend more naturally. This step really brings everything together. To move more quickly through the small details, add this same color to both small pots on the window. It is not necessary to match the real color from the reference. Simply cover the unwanted light gaps. Use the same tone to deepen the window frame and bring in more shadow. Keep painting with wide, gentle patches to shape the cast shadows beneath the plants. This creates a beautifully textured cluster of shadow strokes. Add the same tone to the left gray wall. It helps the foliage blend naturally with the surface. If it feels right for the composition, you can slightly emphasize the shadows even where they don't actually appear. It is an unexpected but beautiful trick to add a touch of the same tone to the glass. Then choose a more neutral shade and give a little color to the pavement, and if you want, spread it to a few other areas to connect them. The foliage now feels light, balanced, and naturally woven into the scene. How does this approach to painting the foliage compare to the way you worked before? Share your experience and ask away if something wasn't clear. In the next lesson, we'll move on to the final details and highlights. We'll refine the window grille, work with highlights on the door and smaller elements, and bring the entire scene together with those finishing touches that make the illustration feel complete. Subscribe if you'd like to see how the project comes together in the final lesson. See you in the next video.